Hello?
George.
Yes, go ahead. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, just know that we'll be broadcasting live to YouTube. So
On YouTube, okay, hold on a second.
It's already broadcasting.
yeah, the link is, they're adding the link so that people can join, but it is already broadcasting. I saw Jason was checking it. So.
But you guys trying to get a promotion or what?
I usually have it and it's just sitting on my chair, so it's like I forget. Right. Hi, George. We are live and it's 7. I think everybody's here.
All the board members are here?
All the board members are here.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our school board meeting. We finished closed session a little while back, and at this time we start the open session of our school board meeting. And so today, as always, we start out with item number 3, which deals with general matters. And we go to item 3.01, which is our flag salute. And anybody want to lead us in that? Any raised hands out there? Nobody's jumping. Who's that? Anybody jumping to do that? Norma, can you lead us in the flag salute today?
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you, Norma.
Everyone, please stand.
Okay.
I know you can't see me, but it's okay. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. That's very nice.
Thank you.
Okay, now at this point, we go on to item 3.02 to approve, disapprove additions to the agenda. If none, we go on to item 3.03, which deals with approving, disapproving order of the agenda. And if nothing there, then we go on to item 3.04, report of action taken in closed session. So we'll have our superintendent report those actions out at this time. Superintendent.
The board at 4 in favor and 1 abstention approved the closed session minutes for September 22nd, 2020. There are no other actions to report.
Thank you, Superintendent. At this time, we go on to item number 4. Item number 4 deals with oral communications. Members of the public may address the board on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board or agenda items. Members of the public may also address the board on consent items before the board's consideration of the items. In accordance with Board Bylaw 9323, individual remarks will be limited to 3 minutes each unless otherwise stipulated. No action can be taken on any agenda items at this time. Questions may be referred to the administration or put on a future agenda. So with that, we go to item 4.01, which deals with oral communications. And Superintendent, do we have individuals who want to address us today?
We have Scott Schulemson that has asked to address the board in this on 4.01.
Okay, good. Thank you. Scott, go ahead. You're on, Scott.
Oh, yeah, I already did.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Great. Tonight, my comments are actually those of Veronica Andrade. Veronica has been an RSP teacher in the district for the last 6 years at 3 different schools. She's been on the FMEA bargaining team, the FMEA executive board, and she is a leader among our special ed teachers who many turn to for advice and support. It is a huge loss to our district and a tragedy that the district did not do more to protect her and other teachers here in Franklin-McKinley. Here is Veronica's letter. Esteemed FMSD board members, my name is Veronica Andrade, RSP teacher at Dahl Elementary. I had wanted to speak to you in person this evening. However, given my upcoming surgery, my doctor has instructed me to avoid any situation that could create additional pain or stress. As such, I am asking Scott Schulemson to read my statement below. Several weeks ago, I emailed the board a detailed letter with concerns about special education issues and providing documents supporting said facts. I hope that this information may help guide a discussion and a move to action that will lead to a more favorable trajectory for students and staff. I want to briefly touch upon the impact student behavior has had on my life. Most of the time when dealing with physical altercations involving students, the psychological and/or physical ramifications on staff quickly resolve themselves. Unfortunately for me, that hasn't been the case. A year and a half later from being injured, I am still dealing with very serious physical injuries to my upper extremities. In 13 days, I will be having right shoulder surgery that will be very painful, and a lengthy recovery time will follow. Once the right shoulder is healed, then the repair will need to begin on my left shoulder. These long-term painful medical issues have created much devastation personally and professionally. I am sharing this information so that it's clear that student behavior can cause extensive damage to employees. This is not an isolated incident. While I was at Dahl, several general education and special education teachers were injured by students. 2 years prior to my arrival at Dahl, the previous RSP teacher also suffered serious injuries in the scope of her work. For years, Dahl has had extreme behavioral situations that run across all grade levels and within the general education and special education classrooms. It is very clear that nothing has been done to address this issue. These issues have been clearly and repeatedly communicated to district staff and nothing has improved. There needs to be adequate behavior supports and/or staff at Dahl to manage what is happening in the moment. If the district expects a principal to manage all the behavior situations at a school site, they are setting them, the students, and staff up for failure. That is an impossible expectation when a principal has to be in legal meetings and supporting and evaluating staff most of the day. No matter how effective your principal is, they cannot manage it on their own. This is precisely why staffing needs to be looked at individually in schools that demonstrate higher behavioral needs. Otherwise, this situation will continue to perpetuate itself at Dahl, and students and staff will continue to be injured. How behavior is dealt with at all school sites must be made a priority for the safety of students and staff. When school resumes in person, behavior will be even more difficult to manage given the lack of structure students have had being away from school. If FMSD doesn't analyze and study the current interventions to manage extreme behavioral situations quickly, incidents such as mine will continue to be a common occurrence. Students are intelligent, and when they see there are no consequences to their behavior, it only continues to fuel the fire. There needs to be a proactive versus reactive approach in dealing with this long-standing problem. This is the time to begin planning in advance for when students return in person. I ask the board to make a commitment to make student behavior a priority. It needs to be studied, tracked, and responded to immediately. The district has a moral and legal obligation to keep students and staff safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott, for reading that statement to us on behalf of Veronica Andrade, our RSP teacher. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do I have anyone else, Superintendent?
No other request to speak.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and go on to item number 5, which deals with information, discussion, and or action items. And we're going to have several reports in item number 5. The first one deals with child nutrition update. So let's go ahead and get that one started. Thank
Okay,
you, Jason.
this is Jason Van, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services. In just a minute, Lori Fritas, Food Service Manager for Franklin-McKinley School District, and Elaine Webb, Sodexo Consultant, will provide the child nutrition update for the board tonight. Before they get started, I just wanted to publicly and personally thank them and thank all the food service staff members for their leadership and creativity to ensure the vital service of feeding our students and our community members during the pandemic continued. It is hard to truly explain and detail out all the many hours that the staff have put in to make this work while practicing social distancing protocols laid out by the Santa Clara County Public Health Department. But they've kept everyone safe. They've met the challenge head on and did not flinch. They served almost 300,000 meals since the date in which our doors were closed to in-person instruction. No easy feat. I am proud to be able to work with them and lucky to be able to support them in their program. They didn't do it alone. They coordinated with Warehouse Logistics Team, the City of San Jose, Catholic Charities, Revolution Foods, and site staff to make this work and keep everyone safe. I thank them for their service. Now, without any further ado, I turn it over to Lori and Elaine to provide the child nutrition update.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate that. That was very nice. Thank you. It's been a privilege to be a part of Franklin-McKinley School District and be a part of this pandemic, the job that we're doing. And without your guys' leadership, we would not be able to do such a good job as you have said. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. So as Jason said, Elaine Webb, the Sodexo consultant, her and I are going to share the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and start off and then she will share the slides. So next slide. So this is just to show the focus of the impact of the COVID-19 to the program. The number of meals served for March 16th through September 30th is just under 300,000. Meals served are prepackaged to ensure the safety to our students, the staff members, and the community. All foods were picked up using curbside service model. Staff members made no physical contact with parents picking up meals. They either went into the trunk of the car or they handed them through the passenger side window. All staff members had face masks on, gloves, and some wore face shields. Families that walked up for meals followed social distancing markers on the pavement. Tables were also used as physical reminders to maintain social distancing protocols. As the person walked up, they stood on the marker as the food service staff provided the grab-and-go meals on the table. And next slide. And Elaine's going to take this slide.
Perhaps Elaine.
Yeah, can you hear Elaine? I can't.
I cannot.
Okay, so Elaine, when you have your speaker, go ahead and let us know. I'll go ahead and continue then. So this is moving on with the COVID program. Franklin-McKinley, as Jason mentioned earlier, we partnered with the City of San Jose, which then partnered with Revolution Foods to help serve the community and the families here. we were able to offer the community breakfast, lunch, and supper, and it was also available for the adults. It was piloted at Santee School, and then after that went very well, it started on May 15th. It was expanded to the remaining 6 sites, and meals were offered Fridays, including Saturday and Sundays. And that was also for adults. And let me see, Franklin-McKinley is currently offering breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack on Mondays, which includes meals for Tuesdays, Wednesday, which includes meal for Thursdays, and Fridays, which includes meal for Saturday and Sunday at all 3 school sites, except for CCA, Bridges, and Sylvandale. Next slide. And this is just a couple pictures here to show that's a setup, how they bagged the food up over at one of the school sites. And then the next picture is just some breakfast and lunch items that were served. Next slide. As you know, Franklin-McKinley applied for and was approved for the community eligibility provision, which is CEP. And unfortunately, with the COVID, we're still serving under our seamless summer, so we haven't actually got to implement that yet. But hopefully, we'll be able to do that soon once we get back to normal. So the CEP is a really good thing for Franklin-McKinley community. It's to qualify for this, you have to have at least 42% of your free and reduced must be students identified through direct certification. We had 3 schools that didn't qualify, which were Ramblewood, Sherricow, and Stonegate. And CEP means that every student at that eligible school site eats free breakfast and lunch. There's no need for free or reduced meal applications. To maintain funding for the sites, all new students must complete an income eligibility form. Direct certification still utilized. CEP also eliminates all IOUs from occurring, reduced administrative burden, simplified meal counting and claiming, equity among students, and potential increase in participation and program revenue. Franklin-McKinley was also awarded a grant in the amount of $363,000 from Santa Clara County Office of Ed to help maintain stability in our program. Next slide. And these are more pictures of the ladies out there doing their job, feeding the community. Next slide. And again, that's more photos. Next slide. And there's some more. Next slide. And upcoming special events. We really don't have any right now other than celebrating having the students return safely. And hopefully that will be soon when it's safe to do so. Next slide. This is the let me see, the offering bar has been, obviously, we're not using it any longer, that all the food that we serve is wrapped, pre-wrapped. So the ladies are either wrapping the carrots and celery to stick in the grab and go bags, and the salad bars are something of the future. But I wanted to touch base on something that when we do return to school meals, that when in-person learning resumes, Franklin-McKinley will follow the CDE Stronger Together guidelines for reopening of the California schools. Because there is no one-size-fits-all model in the face of a pandemic, meal service may vary from school site to school site to ensure social distancing practices comply with local, state, and national guidance. Child nutrition would provide meals to those students on campus while following social distancing practices. And on the 4th day, meals go to the next day that is distant learning, which means that on that 4th day, they would get meals for that Friday and the weekend. Child nutrition, I'm sorry, it's called bulk service for giving more than 1 days of meal. Okay, next slide. This is just a staffing cost, which continues to be a challenge to the program. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Child nutrition goals. These are the goals that we're keeping all staff and students safe, maintaining high quality of food, increased participation, and implementing to the fullest the CEP, and barbecues, hopefully once everything is back to normal, if it can be, and we will do those safely. Maintaining food cost and meeting with principals, making sure all needs are met, and continue to educate our students on eating healthy foods. Next slide. And I'm sorry, this is the one that staffing costs continues to be a challenge to the program. Next slide. And this is the staff trend. And as you can see from 2019, 2020 to 2020, 2021, not anything has changed other than the salary and benefits. Next slide. And this is information for you to see the income eligibility of what it, the scale for you to apply for free or reduced lunches. Next slide. And these are just neighboring school districts at what they charge for middle and elementary school price lunches and breakfast as well. Next slide. And thank you very much. And if there's any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Lori, for that presentation. Let me check with the board members, see if they have questions for you at this time.
Okay.
Board members, go ahead and ask questions if you have of Lori at this time.
I had a quick one on slide 15, where it shows the, what would be the financial impact on the district if we were to match what Oak Grove is charging for their meals? Like I noticed it's $2.75 and we're currently at $2.85. It's like a 10-cent difference, but.
Yeah, we have to be, we have to raise our prices to be equitably. It's required by the state. And, but now that we've gone to CEP, all of that has kind of gone away for right now because there is no, once we are done with this pandemic and we are in a normal school year, the district's going to go CEP. So there will be no charging of, for breakfast or for lunch for Franklin-McKinley, other than those 3 school sites.
Other board members with questions?
Can you remind me what those 3 school sites are again, Lori?
Yes, they are Sylvandale. Oh, excuse me. No, I'm sorry. They're not Sylvandale. It's Ramblewood, Stonegate, and Shirakawa.
And those are the ones that didn't reach the 42% free and reduced lunch count, or?
Correct.
So they'll be charged the following prices right now. So $2.85.
Yes.
Per school lunch.
Yes.
So once we move over to CAP, I'm just wondering what the financial impacts are. I mean, of course, it greatly benefits us, but for the 3 school sites, is there any leeway for us to help there?
Well, we're hoping that that the ISP will go up, and then we will be able to, we can resubmit and see where they're at, and maybe at some point they will qualify for that. But for right now, I really don't have an answer for that.
Can you remind me what ISP stands for in this case?
It stands for Identified Student Percentage.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I just wanted to add in terms of decreasing the price. Yeah, we do have to increase our prices for those remaining sites. So we really don't have the option of going back down. It would be obviously like a 4% decrease in the price per meals. If we had that option, I mean, it could potentially increase participation in the future, but it's hard to tell at this point in time. And yes, it is difficult to change the demographics of those remaining school sites to meet the threshold for eligibility for CEP, but we'll continue to monitor that. We'll make sure that every family has the opportunity to submit information to us so that we can identify them as eligible for free and reduced meal plans going forward. And we're going to go through an extensive campaign to make sure that we have mailers go directly to families in reference to the CEP program and providing income eligibility information.
How often do we monitor that, Jason?
Every year we monitor it. We do a strong push for the first couple of months of the year. This year we actually have an extension under our current distance learning model. Usually we have to have everything done by the end of October, but we now have an extension until December. So we're actually trying to use some of our COVID relief funds to strengthen our campaign to make sure that there are limited barriers to families filling out applications. So we're mailing applications home with a self-addressed stamped envelope. They have to fill out an abbreviated form that's simpler to complete and send that back into our office so that we can capture as many students as possible.
So
yeah, one more thing I'd just like to point out is just the income eligibility for free and reduced lunch. That income is not realistic for the Bay Area. I know we have always been pushing for, I want to say, was it vouchers?
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest barriers if you look at what that threshold is and the high cost of living here, and certainly in other parts of the country that seems to be work. But we also know that we have some students that have qualified in the past that maybe we haven't gotten a form yet because one, they're a distance, they're not coming to school, they're still getting meals. So one of the things that the campaign focuses is on parents understanding that this is more than just their children getting fed at this time, that it does have long-term financial implications for the district and other benefits. So part of that is just making sure that parents understand that it is more than just getting their students meals when they're in school.
Got it. Thank you. Hope that campaign goes well.
Other questions, board members? For Lori? Just a quick one, Lori. I know that you're doing a great job with all the meals being provided. So I want to thank you and Elaine, and then of course thank all the staff that works at the cafeterias and is able to put together all these, thousands of lunches. So I'll ask you real quick in terms of the schools that are not eligible for right now, but are we doing any lunches with them at all, or they basically they just because they're at home? I mean, do we drop off lunches to some of those kids, or they just pretty much provide for themselves?
No, we do offer lunches right now at the three sites. Everybody is eating for free right now.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody's eating for free, and we're offering them at all of our school sites except for Sylvan Bridges and CCA. They're getting breakfast, lunch, supper, and snack, all for free.
Wow, that's great. Very, very good. Board members, do you have any other questions at this time regarding this report? If not, we want to thank you very much again, Lori, you, Elaine, and of course all the nutrition service people out there. So thank you very much. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good night now.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, with that, board members, let's go on to item 5.02. And 5.02 is a report that we have on the social emotional learning update. Social emotional learning update. And Superintendent, who do you have doing this report today?
Juan, I think you're muted.
Sorry. I've invited Jennifer Clausen to give us an update on social emotional learning, specifically on the items that pertain to distance learning and some of the things that we are having to, how to support students. We know that this is a very challenging time for everyone, and so certainly our students are being impacted. So I'm going to turn it over to her. I think she's already on here.
I am. Good evening.
Hi, Jennifer. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
We'll turn over to you at this time, Jennifer.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me tonight to present on this important topic of social and emotional learning in Franklin-McKinley School District. So we're going to talk about a district and school-wide approach tonight. Next slide. Oh no. Is it still there? Because I can't see it.
Just a second.
Okay.
They're setting it back up.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Are we good? Okay. All right. So these are our beliefs. We include them on everything we do to make sure that we are always coming back and grounding ourselves in the reasons and the why we are here for our kiddos. Next slide. So why SEL? Next slide. We have a brief video that Sammer is going to play for us on what is social emotional learning.
Why don't you go ahead and move forward? It seems not to be playing.
Okay, we'll move on. We'll talk about what social emotional learning is in just a few slides from now. So the impact of SEL. Social emotional learning, to be effective, really requires us to infuse the principles of SEL across practices and policies throughout the entire school site. So this picture is really descriptive, and we showed it to the site administrators to ground ourselves in understanding that SEL is all day, every day for everyone. It happens in the cafeteria, it happens in the gym, it happens in the hallways, it happens everywhere. Social emotional learning is not something you do for 15 minutes in a class somewhere. It is really about the relationships to each other, student to student, adult to adult, adult to student, and it really is about how we interact with each other. Next slide. So social emotional learning, it's really about cradle to grave. It is not something that happens when you're 2 and then it stops. It's not something you pick up when you're 14 and then you don't come back to it. It's really about the knowledge and skills and attitudes that you acquire and that you are taught to help you identify your emotions, to show empathy, to maintain supportive relationships. And so especially in this time, if we think about everything that's happening, it's really helping our kids and our adults, right, manage their emotions, understand what's happening in relationship to each other, and maintain those supportive relationships. As we are physically distanced from each other, it is so important now more than ever to really respond to relationships and build healthy relationships as we're not able to be close to each other right now physically. Next slide. So the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, the CASEL framework, is really something we spent a lot of time on within the SEL Advisory Committee this summer. It is a framework that identifies core competencies and talks about how and where they are promoted. Next slide. The CASEL 5. What's really exciting about CASEL, if you've been involved in CASEL or social emotional learning, you've been following their framework for a long time. And what they've done as a result of the pandemic and the climate across the country is they really have adjusted their framework and helped to make it more relevant to what's happening right now in society. The CASEL 5 addresses areas of competency, self-awareness, self-management, decision-making, relationships, and social awareness. And they broadened the framework at the bottom to include authentic partnerships, aligned learning opportunities, and school-wide culture, practice, and policies, as well as SEL instruction within the classroom. And so they've really tried to be intentional about the design of the framework and where social emotional learning lives and how it shows up within the school setting. Next slide. The theory of action is something that was tested and brought forward because in order to have systemic SEL, right, it's not linear, but it's continuous. It takes place over a long period of time. It's not something that you do in August and then you forget about it. To really have systemic SEL within a school district, you have to include areas of implementation, and CASEL's outlined their implementation focus areas, which we've adopted. You have to know when and where it happens, what and where it happens, and why. The research behind the long-term, intermediate, and short-term effects of SEL are proven. And so CASEL presented their theory of action, not necessarily as a checkbox, but really as a lens for sustainability and transformation. Next slide. So this one, oops. The skills we need now. This was incredibly important to bring forward to site administrators and staff as we embraced the work of coming back in August. And what we learned through the social emotional learning work with CASEL is that the skills we need, the competencies are defined, right, through CASEL's Core 5. And they broadened it to talk about the skills that we need now. So if you look at self-management, right? Self-management, we know regulate your emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, you manage stress, controlling your impulses, everything important, right, to be able to thrive. Self-management skills we need now are so critical as we were coping with grief and loss, right, from the pandemic or other things that were happening around the country, developing your resiliency, expressing agency, right, the ability to have thoughts and opinions and express your thoughts and opinions, especially when we were talking about the injustices and the anti-racist movement. It was really important that we brought this forward because it wasn't enough to only focus on the social emotional learning core competencies. We had to make it applicable and relatable to what was happening within our country. Next slide. So the other thing that CASEL brought forward and that we've been talking a lot and working with a lot is educational equity. Transformative SEL really is something that doesn't happen over developmental stages, but it's really understanding the culture, right, behind social emotional learning. If we implement social emotional learning without understanding a student's culture, their race, their economic background, you can actually do more harm than good. You can alienate students, you can alienate adults even. And so there is a harm that can be done if you don't understand SEL through an equity lens. It's really something we strive to help our administrators, right? Build capacity with our administrators to understand, build capacity with our staff to understand that it's a process where you have to build those respectful relationships, appreciations to similarities and differences, and learn to really examine those root causes of inequities. And that's what's really going to drive our district forward. And not only saying we're focusing on social emotional learning, but really understanding what's going to drive it to develop those collaborative solutions to our problems and our community problems. Next slide. So school-wide approach to SEL. When SEL is fully implemented, we talked about this a little earlier, it's infused throughout the entire day. It is infused through academics, core curriculum, instruction, throughout our discipline and behavior systems, and within a multi-tiered system of support. When SEL is integrated, right, not only within the classroom, but throughout our discipline practices and student supports, right, you're going to come at it in a different way. You're going to see our discipline policies and practices emphasize proactive, restorative approaches, developmentally appropriate approaches. And we intervene to really address the disproportionality that is happening. So it's not only living in a certain area, but it has to be integrated within everything that we do. Next slide. Within our classrooms, this is something we took a look at this summer through our advisory committee, and it's something that we've been looking at through early learning, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But we really wanted to have explicit SEL instruction. So something we did in our distance learning is we do have the 15 minutes or the instructional time set aside in the morning to focus on social emotional learning, mindfulness, restorative practices, circle time, to really try to integrate the SEL instruction throughout the day. We wanted to stress to our site administrators that even though we had a designated time, SEL is all day, every day for everyone. That is the vision, right, that we had for social emotional learning. We adopted an evidence-based SEL program that was aligned to CASEL, and that was second step. One of our schools has Leader in Me, another school has Positive Discipline, but we took the opportunity to really make sure that all of our schools had the support and resources to implement SEL through an evidence-based program, and that would be second step. Next slide. The relationship between SEL and student behaviors. SEL really reinforces pro-social behaviors. It helps our students, right, develop those competencies that are linked to positive outcomes. If we think about self-management, for example, and that's what this picture kind of shows, and reflecting on what I was talking about earlier around self-management, that it's managing your emotions, managing stress. And the more we explicitly help our students understand these skills and build skills, explicitly teach them and reinforce them, we are going to reinforce their ability to be able to handle stressful times, to be able to handle their anger or express it appropriately. And so even as adults, if we can manage our behavior, we're more likely to keep our jobs, right? Stay in relationships. And so self-management is something, again, cradle to grave. It is something that does not go away. It comes up throughout our whole life. And so if we think about our kiddos, teaching these explicit skills are really going to impact their ability to practice pro-social behaviors. Next slide. Families and communities. This is, again, part of the core competencies in the framework. We know that to really work with our kids means working with our families and with our communities. We want to create that unifying language, that common language, and that's something, for example, that Second Step does. The Second Step program has a community family component to it. It is designed to bring SEL to the home and reinforce skill building within the home. And so teachers can teach the lessons within the classroom and also communicate with the families through newsletters and through different modes of communication, what they're learning and how they can reinforce those SEL skills at home. That's one example of how we're creating that common language. It also helps at the school site, because if you have a common language at the school site, right, then you're creating that unifying framework that we all understand what SEL is. And we can reinforce that with our communities, with our providers, and make sure, again, it's a systemic, intentional approach to social emotional learning. Next slide. So some efforts of FMSD since 2015. And we went to 2015 because that's when the early learning work started. And the early learning work really was instrumental in moving social emotional learning forward in Franklin-McKinley. And so some of those practices were the pyramid model practices. That was a huge undertaking within the Packard initiative for early learning, as well as reinforcing SEL through PLCs. Our mental health service delivery model, we consistently reinforce suicide prevention and intervention and provide anti-bullying information for our students and staff. Some of the PK through 8th grade efforts, again, all teachers have received Second Step. We did an intentional approach this year around restorative practices. We're not done. We're continuing the efforts with RP, with restorative practices. We trained all of our administrators and social workers back before school started. And we thought that was it was a time that we had to come together and understand how to restore relationships, how to be in circle with each other, right? How to be in relationship with each other. And so we'll continue the efforts around restorative practices. And you'll see in a little bit how our social workers are also incorporating restorative practices. Some of the other ones, oops, go back 1 minute, just to bring in the data element, our California Healthy Kids, and then our multi-tiered systems of support reinforces the way in which we deliver services, right, through our tiered system of support. Next slide. Thank you. So as I talked a little bit about early learning and the driver diagram, this is really to talk about our approach to adult practices. Early learning has really been focusing on the adult practice. And as I said before, social emotional learning is not only about the kids, it's about building adult capacity to understand themselves in relationship to each other, in relationship to students. And so through early learning and through this, our SMART aims and global aims, we've been able to really see by implementing pyramid model practices that are based on social emotional learning, we've been able to see an increase in pro-social behaviors, a decrease in challenging behaviors at the very little TK and kinder, and school readiness. We have been engaging families as partners, decreasing the suspension rate by proactively implementing policies and practices that keep students in school and reduce exclusionary practices. Next slide. Some of the data through early learning and SEL, we've had 67 teachers, staff participate in SEL learning, and that's through the pyramid model training. We collect adult practice data throughout all of our early learning programs and practices. We have trainings and coaching and PLCs, again, to reinforce that adult practice. In doing this SEL work for a very long time, I know that it starts with adults. We intentionally have to invest in building adult capacity, again, to understand themselves, to understand themselves as teachers, as educators, and to really give them the skills that they need to then be able to explicitly teach, right, and build those skills within our kids. Next slide. So we brought some examples forward for you, and we've been doing a lot of work within our Student Wellness and Support Services Department since August, specifically around distance learning. Our school social workers, we have 8, and we have 2 school link services coordinators. They took a deep, deep dive into how to bring SEL into the virtual world. It was not easy. It is not easy still. Even our teachers are struggling with teaching, and our social workers were given the task to figure out how do you take wellness services and bring them into a virtual world. And so some of the ways that they've done that, at the bottom, we have our virtual wellness centers. So all of our social workers have wellness centers. They're virtual. They're very cool. Kids can click on anything within that virtual center and find help, find support, find activities, mindfulness, calming corners. So it's really a great example of how, since we can't be in person, we still wanted to offer students opportunities to access our services. The fall draw event, that is a phenomenal program. I think last draw event by our social workers, we had 90 kids participate, and it's during synchronous time. And Van there is one of our social workers, and there's a kiddo below her. She has them participate in drawing. And so they're building relationships with each other by commenting and talking with each other, again, reinforcing SEL. They're responding to her, and they're participating and building community with each other. And it's something that we're missing right now, right, as we're not in school. And so reinforcing that fun event, but with an intentional focus on building SEL skills, is really what our social workers have been doing with our kids. One other one, we had our suicide awareness presentations for our older kids. It's something we do annually. And then another project that I have to highlight is our Healthier Kids Foundation project, and it's My Health First. And we started doing wellness screenings with our 5th grade students in collaboration with Healthier Kids. And we just started this week. We screened, oh gosh, I think 10 or so kids today. And so we wanted to provide early prevention for our 5th grade students, as we know that the earlier we can identify any sort of mental health, the earlier we can get students help and help them be successful in school. Next slide. So this is some more examples of how we've been supporting in both synchronous and asynchronous. As I said before, we were implementing restorative practices and doing circles with students to build that safe and welcoming classroom environment, even virtually. Doing circles virtually took a little bit of practice to understand how to do, but teachers have been doing it, and our support staff have been building those community circles to try to just create that atmosphere, even though we can't be with each other in the classroom. Some of the asynchronous work, I talked about wellness check-ins. We've done wellness hours. I attended Shirakawa's and they did a wellness hour. It's very cool. You can read books and do yoga and art. And some of our community supports, trainings for staff. We trained choral in certain areas of SEL and crisis prevention to support them as they're doing a lot of work right now with our kiddos in person. So next slide. Wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot of our referrals. We have had a tremendous amount of referrals since we started school. And the next slide I'll show you. Go the next. The areas that we've been getting referrals. It's a little hard to see, but the referral reasons that teachers have been submitting referrals, participation in distance learning, of course, is probably one of the biggest. We've been actively trying to work with our families, students and staff around engaging students in distance learning. So teachers have been using our referral system. They've been connecting with the social workers. I asked our social workers to open consultation hours for staff because we were finding that staff not being in person, not being in the same school setting, not being physically present, we were not able to talk every day like we used to. So one of the things we implemented was office hours or consultation hours for teachers where they could jump on with a social worker and talk about a student, talk about a referral, just try to create that, try to keep that relationship going and that community going, and also try to help reinforce to teachers and build their SEL skills, right, around empathy, right, to really understand why students are not engaging. And so we are consistently trying to think outside the box during this time to meet our teachers' needs, meet our staff needs, and our student and family needs. Next slide. So as I slightly mentioned before, we started a SEL advisory committee. Even though early learning has been engaging in this work for 5 years, we didn't have a systemic approach to SEL that went all the way through PK through 8th grade. And so the advisory committee really took the work that early learning was doing and brought it to a macro level for the whole district. And so as we started this work, we met over the summer to really build that foundational support and plan, developing a vision, adopting the CASTLE framework, and trying to align our resources and policies. We will continue to do this work over this year. The adult SEL competencies and capacities, creating those conditions to support our teachers and our site administrators and our staff. We are going to continue looking at our behavior response and disciplinary practices to align them to social emotional learning and make sure that we are keeping kids in school, rather than excluding them from the learning environment. Promoting SEL for students, we're still looking at our integration with academics. That is an important part of our work plan. We are going to look at how we integrate SEL through science, through literacy, throughout all content areas. That is one of our committee's goals. And then using data, we have to continuously look at our implementation data, look at our early learning data, always for continuous improvement to make sure that we are meeting our goals. Next slide. I think I've reached the end. There's all of our schools. And that is the end.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer, for that
Thank you.
excellent presentation. Let me check with the board members and see if they have questions for you. Board members, do you have a question for Jennifer at this time?
I do.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So I did have a few questions on, if you could explain a little bit more. I did hear a lot on, what's expected of our staff at our sites. And I'm wondering a little bit more if you could share on what the process looks like at the district level to support with SEL. So I know there's like the referral system, but what other types of supports are available at the district level to facilitate this?
So to support, I want to make sure I understand your question. How is the district office supporting the SEL implementation?
Yes.
Or social emotional learning implementation? So part of what we've done is we worked with our site administrators first, right, to make sure there was a common understanding, a foundational understanding of social emotional learning and what it meant to then reinforce that with their staff. So a lot of capacity building with our site administrator. And then capacity building with the second step curriculum. Our school social workers are helping to implement the second step curriculum and help support staff with the implementation. Of course, our student wellness and support services with our schooling services referrals, all of the push-in work that we are doing from the district level, and the school social workers to help staff in the classroom during synchronous time with kids, to run groups, to do mindfulness activities, really trying to support to help them learn alongside. A lot of SCL is new for some of our staff, right? It's a new way of thinking and delivering content, right? And teaching kids and reaching kids. So a lot of our social work staff from the district level has been supporting our site staff for implementation.
And then if I can add also, more importantly, the coordination of services. And so our CBOs, and then I know that, Jennifer, can you speak to the collabs as a way to support?
Sure. So we have weekly collabs. Some of our sites are moving to bi-weekly collabs, but the collaborative is something that we started about 4 years ago. And the collab is a place where it's a meeting where the social workers, administrators, various stakeholders come together to talk about the referrals, to talk about culture and climate activities, to talk about attendance and support each other, right, and supporting the kids. And so again, it can be principals, school social workers, schooling services coordinators, community-based organizations, academic counselors, school psychologists, anyone who has an interest, right, in the referral process and is wanting to be at the table. Those collabs are integral to how the school and the service delivery model runs. We would not be able to do anything without those collabs.
And how often are those happening?
We were doing them weekly from August until just about a few weeks ago, and now we're doing them bi-weekly. And the attendance check-ins are weekly with the principal, social worker and the principal.
Okay, so what would the response time, from staff, if specific to the referrals, what does that look like?
Sure. So we receive referrals immediately after they're sent from a teacher or staff or any community member, and we respond according to need. So if the need is imminent, we'll respond the same day. We have sometimes up to 10 days to respond, depending on getting a hold of parents, offering services, understanding the concern. So anywhere from 1 to 10 days, because again, we want to respond immediately if there's imminent or it's basic needs, homelessness, housing, food. We are quick to respond. And those collabs are the place where we can talk about referrals, disseminate referrals to our providers, and make sure that the principal knows what's happening with the students in those referrals.
Great. And then when can we expect to see an update on, I know one of your slides mentioned the committee working on a uniform behavior response matrix. Yes. So when can our district and our staff expect to see, the next steps for that or the implementation of that?
Thank you. We're meeting again on November 5th. I believe the SEL committee, and we will look at the draft of the uniform behavior response. It is in draft form and ready to be looked at and hopefully disseminated quite quickly after that with some training and capacity building of understanding what the response to behavior is.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions you have regarding the report?
I just had 2 quick ones. One, I like the fact that distance learning is currently starting with social emotional learning and mindfulness. Is this a practice that will continue once students go back on site?
That is a great question, Carrie. I see the superintendent unmuted, but I have 2 things to say probably to that. Yes, we will continue this practice, but we also are looking at the integration of SEL throughout the day. I am not sure I can answer to the instructional minutes at the beginning of the day, but I certainly want to ensure that the mindset is not that we only do SEL for 15 minutes and then we're done, right? The mindset is that it's threaded through the instructional day. So those are kind of 2 things within that conversation that maybe superintendent wants to add to the instructional minutes as far as SEL.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at for when we are in person, and what does it look like for really implementing this all day, every day, and not just, obviously we have to select some time for that explicit instruction, but I think that, we are going to have to think about very clearly, specifically, what are the actions that all the adults are going to be a part of as we have everybody come in person, right? In whatever format that looks like. And that's also for the adults, not just for the students, because we're all in this together and we're all being impacted, with this whole thing in many different ways. So, I know that our focuses are students a lot of times, but I want us to remember that the adults are being impacted the same, or even in more impactful in some cases. And so we are going to be looking at a in-person support system for both the adults and the students.
Anything else? Carrie, did you want to ask something else?
Just an overall percentage of all the instructors at the district-wide that have gone through the SEL training. Is it safe to say 100% at this point, or?
No. So
for the CAP, go ahead.
So for CASEL, it's the principals were all trained, and then they were instructed to go to their school sites and introduce this. But in terms of DEEP, that's still something that the SEL committee is working on in terms of what that scope and sequence looks like, and then how do we monitor the implementation.
The principals at the beginning of the year did take the presentation that we did for them, and they adapted it to their site and presented on the framework and social emotional learning at the beginning of the year. So it is safe to say that all staff received information around SEL and the CASEL framework. But again, as Superintendent Cruz said, we do need to do a deeper dive in continuing to reinforce the competencies and how SEL is integrated throughout the day.
Jeff, I had a quick question in terms of the, I know referrals, 500 have been turned in or so. Where are the social workers with all those referrals? Are they 50% completed, 25%, 1/3? Do you have an idea?
They're 100% taken care of.
Really?
Yeah, when the referrals come in, we were able to, the question that was asked on how the timeline is. So when we get them in, we immediately try to triage, right, and figure out what the concern is. So they're 100% looked at and in various stages of implementation, whether they're in progress, they're completed, the family didn't want services, we've successfully connected them to services, or we've closed the referral. So we do not have a waiting list. We do not, not attend to the referral. So they're processed very quickly on a regular basis.
Okay, that's good to hear. Good, good. All righty. Anything else, board members, on the presentation?
Yeah, I have a few questions. George.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yeah.
When it comes to the data that we need to capture to evaluate how we're doing with SEL implementation, is student disciplinary data also involved in that, just for us as a metrics point to understand how far in we're in implementation, how it's doing, and to me, what I think of SEL is that as we continue to implement this all day every day, then students would be in their response, would have less negative behavior and more positive behavior then. So a good indication of that would be a decrease in student discipline. I know we're not currently doing that during distance learning, but say we go back to the classroom and kids would get citations, suspensions, expulsions, those type of things. Would that be a
Yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, yes, disciplinary incidents is a part of our data metrics that we will be collecting. We can use early learning as an example. In early learning, the metrics we collect are around discipline, attendance, and adult practice data, because we know that sometimes it's not the students, it's how we respond to the students, right? And so our early learning teachers have been collecting adult practice data on themselves to understand how they are responding, to understand what skills they need to improve on, right? And so it's a really important part of the puzzle. It has to be included in ensuring that we are not focusing everything on students, but we are looking at it again in a systemic way, but also a holistic way, and ensuring that we're capturing data, not just for students, but data on our adult practices. And so the metrics would be discipline, and be attendance, culture and climate, bullying incidents and reports, academics. That's what we typically look at for MTSS. And so we would be looking at, as we implement SEL across the district systemically, we will be looking at our data in those measurements. Brendan.
So just for my clarification, because I'm a little confused here, is more towards what the difference between a discipline looks like versus a referral.
I think, are you referring to the schooling services referral?
Yes.
Yeah, so schooling services referrals are when teachers have a concern about a student. It could be a behavioral, right, concern, but they haven't necessarily the incident or the infraction, right, of hurting somebody, right, or throwing something at someone, or doing something that is, ed code violation, right? That would be captured in a behavioral incident through Infinite Campus. And then the SLS referral would probably follow that discipline referral to make sure we're supporting the student's social emotional needs. But SLS referrals are also about basic needs and housing and food and, suicidal ideation. So the behavioral incidents really are focusing on ed code, right? As well as FMSD incident codes.
So it would be safe to say that in the case that there's disciplinary action that needs to be taken against a student, then what immediately follows will be an SLS referral as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
I mean, that would be the goal, Tom, to make sure that, that is the part of this is not just a discipline part of what the student did, but rather than what's the support the student needs. And so I think sometimes when we hear referral, I know that in our, at least when I went to school, a referral meant a behavior referral to the principal, right? In this case, the SLS referral is for services, how to support the student or the family with challenges that they may be facing.
I got it. Got it. Thank you.
Tom, did you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Rudy, did you have any questions for Jennifer?
No, everything's been answered a lot.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I think that's it in terms of the questions we had for you, Jennifer. Thank you very much for your presentation. And
thank you. I appreciate your time.
Keep up the hard work out there.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
All right, take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, with that, let's go move on to item 5.03, which deals with the 2020-21 special education update. So let's go to item 5.03 at this time.
Good evening. The board requested an update on special education, and so Dr. Galvarin will be giving you that information. There was so much that we wanted to share. We slimmed it down to a few important topics, but we hope that it will answer many of your questions, and we look forward to sharing the information with you. So Miriam?
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to bring you up to date regarding special education. This evening, I'm going to focus on 3 areas, tell you about a little bit about the programs we are implementing, and tell you about the distance learning, how it works for students with disabilities, and also give you information about our identification under significant disproportionality for over-identifying students, Latino students under specific learning disability. So slide number 4 will tell you about the various programs that we are offering. In general, our programs are divided into groups, categorical and cross-categorical. Categorical for the students with moderate to severe disabilities, and then our cross-categorical are students with mild to moderate disabilities. And normally these students are working in a self-contained classroom because that will be the best environment for them to learn some skills in order to be and coping strategies in order to go to the larger environment of general education. In addition, what we have been working with it for the last 4 or 5 years, expanding our inclusion program, because our goal is to send our students to their least restrictive environment and let them be educated alongside of their non-disabled peers. So we have been working with various sites in order to expand our inclusion program. Originally, when I started here in 2016, we had pre-K inclusion with Head Start at 3 sites, and we continue with that. Then right now, we do have 27 students who are attending that program. And then we expanded to co-teaching model of full inclusion program at Los Arboles, starting at K, and every year we added 1 or 2 classes. And currently, right, they have about, you can go to slide number 5. There are about 44 students at Los Arboles. But in the meantime, students from 4th grade, normally, generally, they go to 4th grade to Lorraine. So we took advantage of this natural transition. So, and Lorraine, we started the full inclusion program for 4th grade. And then this year we have the 5th graders, and we expanded to Meadows K and 1st grade, and Kennedy TKK and 1st grade. And also Stonegate this year is having full inclusion of students in grade K and grade 4. Right now, the total number of students who are attending full inclusion program, it means that they are with the general education teacher all day with their peers. There are 29 students. So this probably meets the needs of our continuum of education. Next slide. That tells you like the students start in general education and move to full inclusion and then the related services. And we are hoping that we have more and more students in full inclusion in order to respond to some of the kind of like, data that we get from CDE that they would like to see more of our students in general education. So this is just overall about our programs and what we are doing right now. And then we are going right now, we know as of March, we were all going to distance learning, including students with disabilities and all their related services. Next slide, please. So the distance learning for our students, next please, number 8. So for our preschoolers, which we thought that would be the hardest one, but they have the best attendance and they are attending. We have 98 students in our preschool program. They do attend with their Zoom. They learn a lot. They use the platform Seesaw and the parents participate. They participate for their related services. So and the few one that they are not, so the teachers have been contacting parents via via email, trying to reach out. And if they don't hear from the parents, they do make SLS referral. And that means that they are trying to have somebody from, as Jennifer already explained that, to check on the well-being of the family and to see how we can help them. Is it something wrong with the device or something else? emails and if they have other agencies. Teachers, they keep a weekly newsletter letter with parents, so to emphasize what the students have learned during the week, so they give them another layer of opportunity to exercise that. Next slide, please. In the kind of like, you know, with other groups, like which like, you know, our special day class and RSP students, we continue with their, just like the general education, their synchronous time and asynchronous time. So synchronous time, they participate by Zoom, and just like with, you know, general education RSP, sometimes, you know, the RSP teacher or the paraprofessional, they push in with the same way if they were doing in person. And the same thing happens with our special self-contained classroom. And if the students are not attending, again, they try to contact parents the same way, you know, they remind phone calls and follow up that if they need SLS referral and everything else. We do maintain IEPs. We have been holding IEPs since April remotely. Parents now, they feel more comfortable, so they accept it. During April, May, in June, parents will say, no, I want to postpone it to when the school starts. I want it in person, but now they realize that we could do it, and everybody is participating, and people provide the information to parents. We have our interpreters are participating, so it's all in a comprehensive way. Other supplementary, and if in case the students are not able to attend, or they need another layer of support, teachers, they go out of their way, they provide materials and work hard, you know, hard copy material, they send it home, they make binders, and recently some of our psychologists, they are going out of their way, they go and check on the students and families. So that's something that really, I mean, I didn't expect they go to that level. They want to know how the students are doing, especially if they have counseling. And we are using if the students, they need AAC devices, it was provided to the student, the teachers having the same apps or the programs, so they could help the families and model for the families to continue with the student. So next slide, please. The participation, as I said, for majority of them, especially, you know, preschool and elementary, has been consistent, more consistent. We do have issues with middle schoolers. I'm sure there are a lot of SLS referrals to find out what is going on, and just some research, it seems like it is not common. It's a lot of it, the age that they are self-conscious, camera, a lot of things, and also family issues. So teachers, the middle school teachers, they became creative. They created something they call a drop-in, even though it is not in person, but they have a time with the student. They can talk to the student, work with them, and just make them comfortable to come back to the classroom during synchronous time. There are other services, it varies. Right now, we did have a shortage of occupational therapists, so we are contracting with Presence Learning. I think you have the contract tonight to continue with that service. Most other services have been provided. Also, orientation and mobility is another related services that's highly tactile. For students who are visually impaired, we were able to find another non-public agency or educational agency that could provide that service remotely and continue when we come in person to help the students and parents for those students who need that orientation and mobility services. So these are just like all the good news about what is happening with distance learning and how the students are learning, they're continuing. Now we need to go to the source subject of significant disproportionality. Okay, so let's go to slide number 12. So It is disproportionately is overrepresentation, and every year this state send us a report about your disproportionate for most of the time in least restrictive environment, just mainly because we do have self-contained classroom, and that's why we do implement inclusion and emphasize inclusion and encourage and all our sites that to implement inclusion, full inclusion program. So, but on January 30th of this year, we received a letter from the state that we are significantly disproportionate in over-identifying students. Now, you know, disproportionality could be in for race, for disability, for discipline, and in the least restrictive environment. Go to slide number 14, please. So that shows that we are over representing a group of students, ethnicity for a specific disability. So in 2016-17, our Hispanic students, the representative of them in special education was 3.8. The state threshold is 3%. I mean, it has to be 3% of the population. So we were a little bit high. The following year, 17-18, the number of students enrolled in the district went down. However, the number of students who were identified in that ethnic group and disability went up again. So now in this time, we were again overrepresenting that group. And by the year 2018-2019, we continue going over the threshold. And that's why we were identified as overrepresenting Hispanic students under specific learning disability. So what do we have to do? Yes, it is happening, unfortunately. So we need to do something. State requires, next slide, please. State has kind of criteria for us to follow and want us to develop a plan. They call it Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, a mouthful plan. So how this plan is developed. So basically, we are punished because we get the referral from general education. So 15% of the special education budget is put aside to spend for this plan to be used for a student in general education who are Hispanic. And so hopefully we prevent them from not being identified and provide intervention. And we can follow, monitor for 18 months, report to the state, and the state will continue doing that. In addition to that, the state has a trained technical assistant, wants us to hire that person and to help us with the plan and also help us in the future with the implementation and monitoring of the plan. So one of the requirements we have to have two groups to represent. One was a stakeholder leadership to do root causes analysis. Why is it happening? Why are we over-identifying Latino students under specific learning disabilities? So we did identify right away during the month of February. We were getting ready for that. We met with the leadership group. We did what we needed to do. And then the COVID-19 started. But the state still wants us to do it. Next slide, please. There are 4 phases that we have to go in order to complete that CCEIS, or Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services Plan. The first one was, we identify our leadership group and a stakeholder. We identify the technical TA facilitator from the state. I have been attending all the workshop that the state wants us to do through the Napa County Office of Education. So we are holding this one. We identified the tool we need to do in order to do the root causes, and we are looking at many data, qualitative and quantitative data, and we're looking to find a trend in order to do root causes analysis. So right now we are at this moment, and I'm speaking to you, we are at like 3.5 and 2.5 because we need to meet with another focus group or a stakeholder group to finalize the root causes, and then meet again and start identifying the group of the students and what intervention we want to do and how we want to do it. And then bring it to, send it to the SELPA by December 1, and also bring it to the board president for approval, then send it to the California Department of Education on or before December 15. Once it is approved, we have to immediately implement it. And if it is not approved, then we have to make the modification as they require. So next slide, please. The next slide will just tell you that what are the data we have been looking, our quantitative and qualitative data. And one of the things that, we have been constantly analyzing, the last year we did have the resolution that we went through, that we put a lot of intervention, a lot of procedures in place. So which is helping us in development of this plan as well. So as you are looking at it, we look at our data, available data through the state, available data, in-house data like Data Zone and Illuminate, all the information, student information system, and also reviewing every IEPs that we could, going through SACE, reviewing psych reports, the type of assessment they are using, the students, what intervention are used before the referral, is the referral process followed, and we're still working on that. The next slide, please, is telling you about basically, these are just, I'm sure these are demographic information that you have, how many students we had in 2019-20 by December, because every year on December 1, we report to the state, and all these reports that the state is based on that information. So this is the number of students we have, their ethnicity. As you can see, the Latino students or Hispanic are the largest number of our students with disabilities, 677. Next slide, please. The next one talks about the students with disability. Look at the specific learning disability has the highest number, following by speech and language, and followed by autism. So these are all like alarming for us right now. And then looking at next slide, please, slide number 20, telling you about every school site, how many students do they have, what percentage of those students are students with disability, and what percentage of those students are students with disability who are identified as English language learners. Next slide, please. Number 21. I'm going a little bit maybe too fast, but telling you that what number of those students who are identified as a student with disability and they are Latino or EL, how many of them are really SLD at every site? Because this will help us later on to figure out that targeted group that we need to really provide intervention and monitor and make sure that it is effective, and those students are not identified as a student with disability unless there is a disability for them. Next slide, please. Number 22. Again, is telling you about number of students who are SLD and they are EL student. If you look at it district-wise, 66% of our Hispanic students are identified as SLD. They are EL students. So these are all the numbers, that those quantitative data that we analyze, and we are receiving all this information. Another thing we did when we were reviewing IEPs, we wanted to figure out where did these students originally, when was they came to special education? Did they have another disability before, or right at the beginning they were identified as a student with SLD? Many of those, from that 252 students that they were identified, 35 of them already identified in pre-K under speech and language impairment, 20 of them in K under speech and language impairment, and then the 31 of them in first grade. By the time they get to second grade, and they were like their triennial, majority of those students, they were identified as a specific learning students with specific learning disability. Next slide, please. Number 24. that is, again, every site. We did have the numbers. Now this is a bar graph telling you that exactly how many of these students are at each site and how many of them they came from another district. 37 out of the 252, they came from another district. Another thing that we did, again, you know, every time you look at the data, it's just like peeling an onion. You have another layer, you have another layer, you have another layer. So we want to see, well, let's look at the original. Now we know when they identify who referred this to students. So we found out, you know, 115 of them, they were referred by parents, 99 of them through SSD, 32 by the teachers, and very little was other sources. And normally we have community members, doctors' offices, Department of Social Services, you know, those are another agencies that they do send referrals to us.
That was slide 25, please. Slide 25.
25.
Yeah,
now,
thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Slide number 26, it tells you that we just let's look at their attendance rate of those Hispanic students. And you look at the attendance, you notice that, yes, it seems like they do have the highest rate of chronic absenteeism, those students with disability, and they do have the highest rate of suspension. Let's go to the next slide and talk about what we have found so far, analyzing all this qualitative, quantitative, relevant, and you know, meeting with focus groups. So far, this is what we have right now, and we are looking at probably the need for internal accountability and monitoring of our EL students. We definitely need a pre-referral and referral process, and which goes hand in hand with accountability and monitoring, and also core instruction, appropriate intervention. Another thing that came out in both data, that the cultural shift. Still, people need to understand how language is learned and the relationship between language acquisition and language impairment. And that probably requires leadership and professional development. These are just like so far what we have found. We have not, again, the group needs to get together and just focus on one of this in order for us to develop the plan. Next slide, please. As we discuss, we need to have our targeted group. Again, when we are meeting with the leadership group on November 5th, and we are meeting with the stakeholders on November 18th. So we need to identify the targeted group based on the information we have from the sites that probably is more referral, or maybe it's a lot of changes. We need to discuss that. What are the variables we're going to be looking at? And based on that 15% is going to be allocated for intervention and developing that coordinated, comprehensive coordinated early intervening services and plan. So that's where we are right now, and what is going to happen. And when we are meeting with the group, the next steps are on slide number 29. And I already gave you a little summary about that. I know this was a long presentation, but I would like to see what feedback you are giving me, and if you have any questions that I might be able to answer.
Well, thank you, Miriam, very much for that presentation. Excellent presentation. Let me check with the board members, see what questions they have for you. Board members, do you want to go ahead and start asking questions at this time?
I have one. Would it help to increase the number of inclusion classes that we have throughout the district to help address this concern, or?
That's an excellent idea. Increasing inclusion would help us with the disproportionality as far as least restrictive environment. Mm-hmm. So students already identify the significant disproportionality. We want to basically prevent those students even from coming to special education. But that helps, of course. Then later on, we're not going to be over-identifying. Yes.
The concern I have, though, is I don't want to also overlook any, learning disabilities that a student may have simply because we're trying to hit a target number here because the state is mandating it.
But the state also tells you that you do this, but the student indeed needs that. So the assessment will say whether this is a real disability, because we are right now finding out some of these students, probably it is not disability, it's language deficiency. They are lacking vocabulary. They do not know the semantic of the language. So, these are the information. I mean, looking at their present levels, the information you get from the teachers. And then when we are in a focus group, the interviews, like what intervention are you using? People, even though we have English 3D, we have Lexia, we have lots of people turn around and say, well, we don't have anything. So, these are the things comes up in our qualitative data. And then you're wondering, so are we holding them accountable when they are referring to look at those things and provide that information before referring the student, or at the SSD level? Are they looking at those data?
So Carrie, just you're right. I mean, this is not a process to prevent students from getting the services they need, but rather ensuring that the systems and interventions we have are accurately identifying students that need that IEP and those services, and not have students that needs would be met in other settings.
Carrie, did you have any other questions? No, okay. Okay, Ton, did you have any questions?
I don't.
Okay, thank you. And Rudy, no questions? Maimona, did you have a questions?
I did have questions and I submitted them before, so maybe if I can just get those included for the record. I think one of my ongoing thoughts here is I'm just interested to see what the work will look like in providing, from the district level, what will the support look like in general education when we're providing that to help us address, over identification or other issues that might not be a specific learning disability. I mean, it still could, but as long as we're, looking at our process with SSD or with others, referral processes for testing, and also making sure our parents are included in understanding what that process looks like, so that we're doing a better job to, identify the students that need the support, because it's whether or not it's due to a disability. I think regardless, students need to be getting the supports that they need, based on the areas that are showing up. So that's my broader, I guess, just wondering as we continue with the next steps of what the supports will look like in general education, how we can continue to build those.
So this is just, again, the feedback has to come from leadership and stakeholder together. It's not something that I personally making that particular decision, and I am as much curious and would like to have, I'm sure, to see what they are going to recommend. So, and I'm sure we will bring it back to the board for review.
May I add a few things? So one of our learnings in this whole process, we've had to actually, what I call, look in the mirror very hard and say, what is it that we're doing that is causing this result? And so some of the learning that we've had is that we really need to strengthen our systems in place. We have to strengthen the instruction that goes on in the classroom. We have to make sure that teachers clearly understand when there is an issue of language acquisition versus a reading problem. The reading problem could be due to the fact that the students aren't, proficient in the language, but it could be misunderstood as the student is needing different kinds of supports. We've had to look at the way we monitor this. And one of the questions that Miriam and I have been talking about is, what systems do we have to put in place to make sure that we're not waiting for the state to find this, but that internally we're looking at data, whether it's twice a year, every month. Can we pull reports? Can we see where students are being referred and why they're being referred? And so that's just a little bit, Maymona, of what we're looking at. And that's where the district comes in, because whichever target group or school we work with as part of the requirement, the district will have to be very involved. We will have to work with that site. We're going to test and pilot a lot of these interventions to make sure that we can then learn from it and then implement it district-wide.
And part of that is we will have, as part of the requirement, the testing and learning of this is following those students and monitoring them for 2 years to see what happens as a result of these practices and these supports, so that we can see how successful we were to meeting their needs. Again, whether they went into an IEP and are they doing well? If they didn't go to an IEP, how well they're doing, because that's supposed to inform the entire system across the district for students that sort of fall in that category, so that we're improving the outcomes of all students moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Martinez-Palmer, also for going over that. I'm glad we're looking at the systems level and structures as well.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Miriam, I just had a quick question regarding the disproportion of students, basically all Hispanic. Now explain to me one more time, what's the plan, or what's going to happen in this regard to bring them down to the 3% that is, I guess, the data that the state wants to see?
So when we write that plan that the state wants to do, we have to identify a group of students who are Latinos with similar thing, and then put interventions in place. We need to implement the intervention. We need to monitor, and we need to make sure that it is implemented with fidelity. And then for 2 years, or they say 18 months, follow these students to make sure that it is effective, it is working, and they are not going to be, hopefully, in having IEPs, or if they do, it is really, really organic reason. It is a true disability, not language deficiency. So we need to provide a lot of trainings. I mean, a part of that, it is, in order to put a system in place, we need to provide professional development to our administrator, to our teachers, general education teacher. A part of it is mindset as well. So it is a big job. It is not, even though the state thinks that 15%, this small group, but it will give us kind of like a pilot. And when something works out, it spreads quickly. And we're hoping that people will learn from that. And then other 13 sites or 14, 15 sites, depending on where we get, they will follow that process. Because when the process starts and establishes from the district and monitors, and then we're going to hold people accountable and show them what they have to do, it will be effective. Then their students are not unnecessarily identified to come to special education because they think special education is going to help them learn language.
Okay, thank you, Miriam, for that explanation. And does any board member have any other question they might come up with? If not, we just want to say thank you. I know it was it's a long report, a lot of information, but something we definitely need to know and be aware of as we move forward with our special education population. So thank you very much, Miriam. Okay, at this time, we're going to move on to item 5.04, the appointment of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging committee members. 5.04. Superintendent?
You're on mute, Juan.
Sorry, thank you. I bring this forward as the resolution that the board passed back in January. And obviously with COVID enclosure, we're a little delayed in bringing this forward, but I did manage to get a number of confirmations from staff in the various categories and parents. The one area that I'm still struggling to get confirmation is with the 2 students. I should have that before the first meeting, but I bring this forward for board approval. This is a board standing committee, and per the board bylaws, it is required for me to submit a recommended list of participants in the committee, and then the board gets to approve those and appointed by the board president. The timeline of this to come back to the board would be once the committee is appointed, and we would have our first meeting in November. That then during that first meeting, the charter information would be worked on, sort of the timeline, the topics, and the outcomes would be worked on by the committee that then would come back as an update to the board, so that the board is understanding of what the scope of work the committee is doing on behalf of the board, because that's what a standing board committee does. It works on behalf of the board to bring to it recommendations that then the board can take action and administration implement. So this is the slate of committee members that have graciously agreed to serve in this capacity. I'll have board member Elsa Alberta say a few words. And she was driving force behind the committee, the resolution and forming the committee. And I just realized that submitted by, I forgot to put my name. Okay. And Raimona's.
Thank you again for your efforts, Superintendent Cruz, with recruiting people to help us make sure we have a diverse group of stakeholders who are going to engage in this work. So I'm excited to see what happens with the first meeting and the updates, the subsequent updates to the board.
Any questions from?
Juan, do we have the Maimona? You're our board representative, or do we have to appoint you for that?
That is something that this board has to find a board representative. So I wasn't going to do that for in that situation. So yes, George, a board member needs to be appointed to the committee.
Well, as a president, I usually don't make the moves first, but I definitely would like to make this move first and appoint Maimona to go ahead and be our board member on the committee, if she accepts.
Yes, I do. Thank you, President.
I know she has a busy schedule ahead of her. Thank you, Maimona. Do we vote on that, or do we just?
It is an action item.
Okay, it's action item. Okay. All right. So 5.04 action item. And so I do appoint Maimona to go ahead and be our representative there. So I'll need a second on that.
Second.
Second.
Good. So we have a first.
Board President, can you restate your motion that it's to appoint board member Maimona Alberta and the slate of committee members that have been presented, so that it's.
Yes, I want to appoint everybody on the committee. I want to appoint all the committee members that are on this resolution, and which is, of course, our board member, community members, the 2 site administrators, representatives from Student Services, Human Resources, Business Department, and Ed Services, 2 classified, and 2 certificated staff, 2 students, and 2 parents. Did I name everybody? I think I did. I have I printed out. I print out a lot of stuff. You can't believe how much I print out for these meetings. I spent Tuesday printing out stuff. But anyway, so those are the individuals, including Maimona, our vice president, I would like to move to be a representative on this committee. So that's the motion I make, and I'll need a second on that.
Second.
Okay, perfect. So I have a motion and a second by our board clerk, Tan. And so at this time, we'll take roll call because we haven't done that. So let's take a roll call. Carrie?
Aye.
Okay, Rudy?
Yes.
Tan?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye. So that resolution passes unanimously. And thank you, Maimona, for spearheading the effort to bring this resolution in this committee to fruition. So I wish you much luck as you start your meetings with each other. Thank you very much. Okay, with that, let's go on to item number 6, which deals with consent items. And we have items 6.01 through 6.05. So I'll need a motion and a second. Unless someone wants to pull one of these, then you have to let me know right now. If not, I'll need a motion.
Move to approve consent item 6.01 through 6.05.
Second.
Okay, we do have a first and a second to approve item 6.01 through 6.05. So I'll do a roll call once more. Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Han?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye too, so that passes unanimously. Let's go on to item number 7. Number 7 deals with consent items over $25,000. And I forgot to mention that community members of the public, so on, can go ahead and address us on any of these consent items that we are looking at right now. So consent item number 7 goes to 7.01 through 7.12, 7.12.
I'd like to pull item 7.06, please.
666. Okay, so we'll do 6. All right. So item 7.06 will become action item 9.05. 9.05. Okay. Any others that you would like to that anybody wants to pull at this time from this list? I just wanted to make a comment, but do I have to pull it just to make a comment on one of these?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me do 7.12. Let me pull that one. 7.12. And that will become action item 9.06. Okay, so we have those two. Anything else, board members out there? No? Okay, then I'll need a motion and a second to approve the rest of the consent items.
I move that we approve items 7.01 through 7.05 and 7.07 through 7.11.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve all the items except 7.06 and 7.12, which we have become action items. So let's do a roll call on item number 7 here, consent items. Carrie? Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Han?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye too. So those items pass unanimously, except for 7.06, 7.12. Okay, let's go on to item number 8, construction items. These are items dealing with construction. Again, the public may address us on these items. And we have 2 items today. We have item 8.01 and 8.02. If there's no, does anybody want to pull any of these items?
Move to approve consent items 8.01 and 8.02.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve items 8.01, 8.02. So let's do a roll call. Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Han? Han?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye too. So that passes. Those 2 items pass unanimously. Okay, so at this point we go on to action items So that would be number 9 on our agenda. Let's go to 9.01, our personnel report. And I believe we have none, right?
We do.
Oh, we do. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Maimon.
I move that the personnel report be approved and submitted, and that A, the employment for the following employee be approved. John Keeling, teacher, SDC Bridges, effective September 8th, 2020.
Okay, need a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a first and a second on item 9.01. And let's do a quick roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Han,
Aye.
and Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye too, so that passes unanimously. All right, let's go to item 9.02, the September 22nd, 2020 board meeting minutes. If you can take a look at those minutes, and then I'll need a first and a second on those minutes.
Move to approve action item 9.02, the September 22nd, 2020 board meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the board meeting minutes of September 22nd. And let's do a quick roll call. Carrie,
Aye.
Rudy,
Yes.
Don,
Aye.
Maimona,
Aye.
and George, and I vote aye. So that passes unanimously. Let's go to item 9.03, reporting on delegating authority to take the necessary action to protect students and staff from the spread of coronavirus. Superintendent, did you want to address us in that regard?
Yeah, just a couple of comments there. I want to thank Child Nutrition Services for their presentation today, special education and SEL. A lot of the information that they provided was pertaining to our ability to support students and families during distance learning, and especially echo Jason's comments in regards to our appreciation for our staff, our Child Nutrition Services staff. Been just incredible. They've been coming in, even working overtime on vacation days, because even though normally we would not feed our students during those days off, we know that this is important, and they've come in and provided meals even on those days. So I extend my appreciation to them. Just wanted to remind the board that we are having town hall meetings this week as it relates to our gathering of feedback, of input, and we did also send surveys to staff and to families so that we can gather that information, so that next board meeting we will come to the board with a further recommendation on what the instructional program would look like post-December. As you remember, this board authorized the district to implement distance learning through December 30th. And so we are due to come back to the board with a follow-up recommendation for how we conduct instruction, post December 30th. And so I welcome you to join us if you can on those town hall meetings. We have one in Vietnamese, one in Spanish, one in English, and then one for staff, Wednesday and Thursday. Just wanted to also let you know that we are expanding our choral program thanks to a grant that we were able to get from First Five through a generous anonymous donation at this point. And so we're continuing to provide in-person support for students through the choral program, for supporting students and families that need that structure and that space for them to engage in distance learning. So Jason and his team have been working with choral to ensure that we have the appropriate space and the protocols in place to continue to support that at our schools. And then you can see, and you've already approved some of the purchases of devices so that we can continue to provide that. And also, as we anticipate having to replace some of them when we come back for in-person instruction. That is all I have to report at this point.
Thank you, Superintendent. Now, should we vote on this one in 9.03? Is that a voting item or just information?
No, this is just information.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go down to item 9.04. Formal acceptance of the 2021 Community Eligibility Protection CEP grant from the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Did you want to say something on that one?
I can say this one if that's okay. Yeah. As we talked about earlier tonight during the child nutrition update, Franklin-McKinley School District was approved for a grant from the Santa Clara County Office of Education in the amount of $363,000 to help support our nutritional program at 13 of our sites. It's not all the sites because only the sites that were eligible to participate in the community eligibility provision program were able to receive benefits from this grant. So we're bringing it to the board tonight to get formal approval to take possession and utilize this grant going forward to support our program.
All right, thank you, Jason. Board members, any questions? If not, I'll need a motion, a second item 9.04.
Yeah, just one quick question on this, George. So the 3 schools that weren't included in the CEP grant, you said we had to December to get the numbers in. And if the numbers do change and they reach that 40-something% threshold, would we get additional funds for that?
We probably have to wait till next year to apply for those funds for those sites.
Okay, that's unfortunate.
Okay, I move to accept the CEP grant from the Santa Clara Office of Education.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion, a second to on 9.04. Let's do roll call. Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Ton?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye too. All right, so that passes unanimously. Let's go on to item 9.05, which was formerly 7.06, ratification of the 2021 contract with East Valley Schools Transportation Agency. Maimona, did you want to address this?
Yeah, so I know this is a ratification, but I guess my question is, have any students been transported during the time of school site closures?
No.
Okay, so I have an issue. I understand it's based on the way that this, the way the contract works with the East Valley Schools Transportation Agency, but to say that we're paying $770,000 more, like that much money, and yet they're not actually providing the service. I just think that's, I mean, if they were providing a service, I could understand that. And I guess I understand it encompasses more than just the transportation, but I just find that really troubling that we're kind of tied into that significant amount of cost, expenditures, when at this point in time, for at least half of the school year, they're not actually providing any direct services to our students.
Just to clarify, the 770 is the total annual cost, so not to exceed the 770. The actual cost of the first invoice, they bill us on a quarterly basis, is about 132,000. So most likely we won't pay the 770 in full, but they are asking for payment for the first quarter.
And just to add to that, this is not a third-party contract. We're actually part of the JPA, which is we're sort of, along with the other districts, are the operators of that service. So very much like we are paying for, and we weren't able to reduce staffing for transportation per the approved budget by the state. We are incurring the transportation costs even though we're not transporting students. So this is not a third-party contract that we would be able to get out of because we are part of the JPA.
But are these our staff who are doing the transporting?
No, they're so the JPA we are one entity combined with the other districts that basically compose the authorization and the management of that service. Jason, do you want to go a little bit into more of that, or?
I guess I understand that we're part of a group of districts that are paying for this. I just think that it's to expect districts to contribute the same amount, including all of their service fees and everything, without any type of acknowledgement that we're not getting the same services that we're paying for. I just don't see how that's reasonable. I could understand covering people's salaries or doing our best to help, understanding that it's putting a lot of different organizations and businesses in a tough place. But it just seems like we're putting a lot of money and there's no really, there's no understanding for the given situation, given that we're not actually getting these services. And I understand that we're not the only district that's a part of this. I just think it's problematic that there's, unlike a third-party vendor where we pay based on the services rendered, that in this case, at least for 2 of those quarters, right? Because we've decided that it's at least distance learning through December. So nothing is going to be.
May I interject a little bit first, Jason? This is an agreement that was it's like 20 to 24 years ago. That's based on all the parties that are involved. Is that right, Jason?
Correct.
And it's a fixed cost. Now, if we want to change this, if we want to do any change, we have to change it with the joint powers agreement. We can't just, bargain a lower fee because it's a fixed cost regardless of how many students are transported, right, Jason?
Yeah, there is a portion that's fixed. So they do acknowledge that the fixed cost is what they're asking all of the partners of the JPA to help pay for.
Right.
They realize that there are not going to be expenditures for gas and repairs because they're not transporting students right now. So they don't expect us to fully pay the $770, but since this is their estimate as of now, if they were to transport all these students, but they will not incur that cost.
And now from the board's point of view, we don't have to approve this. We don't have to be a part of this, but if we want to make changes to it, we would need to go to all the parties that are in the joint powers agreement to make any changes to the cost. Otherwise, it's been a fixed cost for 20 to 24 years.
Do we know what the other districts that are part of this are doing?
They're all paying.
They're all paying.
Same.
So they all agreed to pay and not negotiate. Okay.
Well, we would have to negotiate, like Rudy says, we would have to negotiate with each other because we're all part of the JPA. We would have to renegotiate the joint powers agreement and how that is all set up and how we all pay into this pool to manage the cost of transporting students, especially outside the district. So we would have to renegotiate that agreement.
And is there a reason that the districts aren't looking to negotiate? Because so based on what you said, Jason, does this mean that they have put in writing or that it's guaranteed that we're not paying that full 770,000 amount? Have they agreed to reduce the costs for gas and other things that aren't being used?
They have said it in writing via email. I tried to get additional information from them, but nothing as of yet.
Okay, so that's something that I would like to know, right?
Maymona, however, you got to understand that when you said the other districts don't want to negotiate, that's not true. They might want to, if asked.
It was a question, Rudy. It was a question of whether the other districts wanted to negotiate.
Oh, I thought you said they didn't want to.
I don't know because I haven't communicated with the other districts on this issue. That's why I'm asking. I'm trying to better understand the process so we can make sure that we're not, as the board is responsible with our fiduciary responsibility, I want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence with understanding why we are expected to pay the same amount. And if they are, if they are saying, Jason, that they're going to make, certain considerations, I would like to know that and know that and know whether other districts are also engaged in this process with this agreement.
Okay, just keep in mind that if we are not a part of this agreement, it could be more to our district. I mean, that could happen, yeah. Huh?
So Jason, when is the next joint powers agreement meeting? Because we have meetings of the entity. Do you know?
I don't have the date of the next meeting, but it doesn't stop me from having a conversation starting tomorrow with the group about next steps. If for some reason we would want to disconnect from the JPA, we have to provide a written notice in advance, 1 year in advance of leaving the JPA. And we're legally obligated to honor this contract right now because it is a automatically renewing contract.
Is it possible to get an addendum because of the current situation we're in with COVID to ensure we're not hit with the full amount?
We can certainly do that. Try to do that. I mean, again, it's something that we would have to negotiate with all of the members and make sure that we get agreement from the majority of the members to do it. But I do believe they will honor reducing the costs because it is another school district that essentially is helping with providing the service. So,
and it may be lower this year.
More.
It may be lower this year, right?
It is expected to be lower this year.
Yeah.
But we can try to get an addendum to provide more security around getting a lower price or a lower.
Yeah, because it just the agreement says not to exceed the amount of $770,000. That doesn't mean we're going to spend all that.
Correct.
But that's not something you budget into the year, right? We're not budgeting 770,000 until we actually have the costs incurred.
Yeah, it's going to be based on cost incurred. We'll always evaluate what the true cost is going to be. We're going to have continued conversations with the JPA to figure out what that's going to be for the remainder of the year. And we'll update that as part of our first interim and second interim.
Right, because when it comes down to it, it's not ethical for someone to bill us for something that they never provided. And in this case, they won't provide transportation for students in the second and third quarters after March, I believe.
It depends on when they can start their program and provide services. At this point in time, I have not heard when they're going to start their services. So they could start as soon as January, but obviously it also depends on whether we want to have our own students transported, right? As part of our program.
Because they do transport students that are in county programs. So my understanding is that county programs may be starting up. And so they would have to transport those students, and then we would be invoiced for that as well. But I understand your concern, Maimona, in terms of just this, and Cabinet had a lengthy discussion about whether we had any opportunity for us to consider not paying it or what options we had. But because of the legal agreements we have under the JPA is why we're bringing it forward, because we are obligated to pay that. We did have that discussion as well within the SELPA executive committee, which is the superintendents of all the SELPA, which is who is part of the JPA as well. So these are discussions that are happening. It's just at this point, all the districts are in a position where we believe that this is the only thing we can do at this point, which is pay the invoice.
Right. This has to be ratified. Otherwise, we have to give a year's advance notice. Is that correct, Jason?
That's correct.
Okay, so we really need to ratify this. It has nothing to do with us spending $770,000. And Ton, I loved your comment when you talked about, well, if we're not using it, we're not going to be billed for it. That's basically what I understand it to be as well.
Yeah,
well, to a certain extent, we are. I just want to make sure that it's clear. There are costs that are fixed costs that we would be billed for, even if they don't transport a single student. So Ton is correct that we would.
Got it.
The case.
Got it.
And that's what I'm hoping with Carrie's, idea. I'm hoping that we can get that in writing and get that, negotiated as part of an addendum, so it's clear to all parties, that there is some level of understanding that we're not going to be expected to pay the $770,000. And hopefully we can have some resolution to that prior to the next billing statement or cycle.
Okay, well, I move to ratify the 2020-2021 contract with East Valley Schools Transportation Agency.
Second.
We have a first and a second on action item 9.05, which is what 7.06 became. Action item 9.05. We have a first and a second. So at this point, we'll do a roll call. Carrie?
Aye.
Okay. Rudy?
Yes.
And Tan?
Aye.
And Maimona?
Aye.
And George? And I vote aye on that. Okay. So that action item passes at this time. Okay, let's go on to the next one, and that was 7.112. And basically, I pulled this because I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved in the purchase of the 1,200 Chromebooks. That's impressive. And where did we get the money from? I know I went over that, I just can't remember right now, the 7.12. Where did this money come from?
This is actually a donation from the CDE Foundation in Office Depot. So
Right.
there was no money on our side in reference to this. We just got the Chromebooks.
That's fantastic.
Mhm.
That's good. Okay. And the Chromebooks, are they going to, have you picked out the kids that they're going to schools or staff?
They're already out.
Yeah.
They're already, oh, okay. You have
They're
them all.
already out.
Oh my God. Okay. They're gone. Okay.
You
That's
can't
good.
have one, George.
No, as soon as we got them, they went out.
Holy
Along the same lines that of the comments we have made that we've made about child nutrition services.
Oh,
Tell you that our IT department has been on it. They've
Yeah.
been working, since closure and ensuring kids have,
Yeah.
devices and hotspots and just dealing with the myriad of tech issues that can come up with having that many devices out there. And it's just been incredible the work that they've been doing. And so, we want to extend our thanks to them as well. And those are already out at the school sites.
Okay, I move that the board accept the donation of 1,200 HP Chromebooks from the CDE Foundation.
okay. So we have a motion, a second on action item 9.06, which is what
Second that actually.
7.12 became. So I'll need did you do a second, Tan?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we have a first and a second. Let's take a roll call. Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Tan?
Aye.
Maimona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye too. So that action item passes unanimously. Okay, so that completes our action items. At this time, we move to item number 10, which deals with communications from the superintendent. Superintendent.
Yeah, I've already shared some of the things that have been going on. The only other thing that I want to let the board know that I participated in the Yale National Initiative conference this year. It was virtual, so we didn't have to travel all the way to Yale, even though that's a nice trip. But we did have that conference virtually, and we do have one teacher that participated in this very rigorous, intensive professional development, and the teachers, the math and science teacher from CCA. And so at one point we will recognize her for her work in this initiative, and then looking forward to the next slate of teachers that will participate this next year. They're hoping that it will be in person by that time, by next summer. But if not, they've figured out how to do it virtually if that's needed. So just great to continue to see our teachers can improve their craft and our students being the beneficiaries of the units that they put together through this initiative.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, so at this point, we go to item 11, communications from the Board of Education. And we go first to item 11.01, board member report. So I'm going to go down the roll call list. Carrie.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to attend the Human Commissions Committee meeting. and they're bringing forth some pretty cool initiatives. They're requesting the city to recruit a disability leadership task force to advocate for people with disabilities. They're also requesting that the city invest in developing internships and vocational programs for young adults with autism. And they're also requesting that the city implement a structured literacy program similar to the one in San Francisco Public Libraries called the Free Orton Gilliam Readers. So yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you, Carrie, for that. Rudy. Rudy?
Yeah, hold on. I was on mute and I started talking. I attended virtually the electric bus ribbon cutting, and it was well done. The ceremony was great. I thought it would be a little quirky with, me being online, but I just like to thank Juan for putting on helping, and whoever else helped organize an excellent ribbon cutting. And then, one thing I wanted to mention was that I think Carrie's a little bit humble, but she's been participating in some awesome, incredible events as a panelist or just being participating in it. I mean, she's been posting them on Facebook, and I just wanted to recognize her for her outstanding outreach. And I know that she's been a great ambassador for our school district. So thank you, Carrie, for all of the things that you've been involved with. And I do catch Maimona's as well. And she's been involved as well in some. And unfortunately, I don't have the list, so I can't give a list. But I just wanted to recognize our two board members that have been involved quite a bit virtually. And maybe someday we'll get back to our normal living every day to day. And the last thing is I just want to congratulate the Dodgers for winning the World Series. That's it.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Rudy. Tan.
No report.
Okay. Maimona.
I'll just make it quick. Thank you for the kind words, Rudy. I was able to attend the State Assembly Education and Communications Committee's hearing, which was on student access for internet during distance learning. And so there's still a lot of efforts that it looks like the state is also interested in helping support. So just excited to continue seeing what efforts move forward and how we can continue to push to provide that access to our students and families. Thanks.
Thank you, Maimona. For myself, just a couple of real quick things. I did attend the electric bus ceremony, and that was very, very nice. Nicely done. And we got, was it 12 buses? How many buses do we have right now?
7.
7 buses?
We're getting more.
We're going to get more though, right? We're getting more, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're trying to work on 5 more.
Oh, 5 more. Okay, that's good. And I guess pretty much throughout California, there's other districts that, of course, are very much involved in terms of getting solar or electric buses. So that's good to see. I think that's going to be much healthier in the long run, not only for our kids, for our air quality and society in general, that we breathe all these fumes out there. So that was very, very nice to see us go in that direction. And let's see, also helped out with Larone Food Drive, which now I'm becoming a regular. I don't know how that happened, but I'm helping out because I'm not subbing right now. There's nobody needs a substitute administrator. So anyway, so I'll continue helping out as long as they don't call me from one of the schools. And that's my report. Okay, let's go on to item number 11.02, agenda item request. Board members, do we have any specific agenda item requests you would like to bring forward at this time?
Yeah, I do it. I don't know if it's already going to be on the agenda. Possible decision to end distance learning and go back to in-person school. Is that on the agenda, upcoming one?
Yeah, for the next board meeting, we will be bringing to the board a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, that's all. Board members, anybody else with an agenda item request?
before I make the formal request, I just want to see, will the JPA agreement be coming back to the board at all? The transportation item?
If there's an addendum that has been approved by the board, I think that would be something that we could bring back to the,
Okay, so I would just like an update. I'd like to request an update on what happens with that, whether it's an addendum or other types of negotiations that happen.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and I think we don't have any more agenda item requests. All right, let's go on to item number 12, future business, and we'll go down to item 13, future meeting date. So the next one, again, we only have one in November 10th, Tuesday, November 10th, 7 p.m., and that's a remote board meeting. Then we go to item 13.02, December 8th, 2020. We have our one board meeting in December, and then we go after that to, believe it or not, January 12th, 2021. At 7 p.m. and that's another remote board meeting. So closed session, we're not going back on item 14 to closed session. So 15, I need a motion, a second for adjournment.
Move to adjourn. Second then.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for adjournment. So I'll do a quick roll call one more time. Carrie?
Aye.
Rudy?
Yes.
Han?
Aye.
Mona?
Aye.
And George, and I vote aye to go ahead and adjourn. And we're adjourning at about approximately 9:23. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Celebrate. Dodgers win.